Okay, I want to go ahead and kick the meeting off. So welcome everybody here this evening. This is the monthly meeting of the Dorado Community Council. We did have to reschedule this meeting because of other travel. I went back to the cap the first part of the month, and so we rescheduled to tonight. So if it looks like it's very close between tonight's meeting on the 20th and the next meeting, which is on June 3rd, if you can go down the council member items, that's our next meeting. So they're pretty closely tied together, but I think it's important to maintain the communication. So we're doing what we can in that regard. So having called the meeting to order, I would like the leadership team to please kind of go roll call and identify who you are and what your responsibilities are with respect to the community council. Let's start with Chief Lilly.
Yes, Michael Lindell, I'm the Deputy Chief with Dorado Hills Fire Department. My job here is public safety. I try and liaison with CHP, Sheriff's Department, Fire, and any other public agency that looks at issues you might have of any type. Really, my job is to network with another agency that has the jurisdiction to try and help with your problems like that.
I'm John Davey, I'm the chair of the Dorado Hills AFAC, and our volunteer group addresses development projects in Dorado Hills and provides resident input to the process.
I'm Richard Ross, I'm just a citizen in the community, and I follow the government activities within our county and look to see if we have transparency and engagement by the public and awareness by the public.
Good evening, I am Glenn Krakow. I am currently the Vice Chair of CDAC, the Community and Economic Development Advisory Committee for the Board of Supervisors, representing District 1, and a little bit later, hopefully, you guys will stick around because I do want to get some feedback from those in the room about attainable housing in our county.
John Vania, District 1 Planning Commissioner, and I handle the infrastructure issues.
Josh Shelter, I'm an emergency provider, emergency physician, and helping John with figuring out ways to improve the health department.
Okay, thank you. The other thing we want to do is recognize the committee members or commission members who are present. So I see Raylene Nunn back here. Raylene serves on our Commission on Aging. So if you have any questions relative to our services for seniors, various programs that are offered, or have some insight as to some things that you'd like to see changed or improved, she's our contact. I will mention that there's going to be an award tomorrow for Senior of the Year. So it's going to be held at the county offices downstairs from where the Board of Supervisors meeting is, but that's an annual event that I think is very much respected and encouraged from the standpoint that it's a way to recognize the seniors and the committee involvement, the volunteerism that they have, and what that means to our community. So, and then we also have a commissioner here who deals with the, I got to get this right now. Human Rights Commission. Thank you. So, would you please identify yourself?
Good evening, everyone. I'm Alan Stansberry, appointee of Mr. Heidolfs to the County Human Rights Commission. There are 7 members of that commission. That includes 2 members of the Board of Supervisors. And I want you all to note a date that's coming up in July the 22nd, from 4:30 to 6:30 at the Vets Hall in Placerville. We're going to host a public forum. What we are intending to do is create a needs assessment in the county of what kind of needs are required to take care of any human rights problems that we might have. We don't even know if we really have any. So those who represent organizations such as yourself now, please come and talk to us about what you see and what you think the county needs in view of human rights and so on and so forth. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan. I should also recognize that our lead for community information and outreach, Cindy Munt, is not with us this evening. But I would encourage everybody to please sign in on the attendance sheet if you haven't done that, because we do like to keep a record of who's coming, and if you'd like to be added to our distribution list of emails for the meetings, and then also the minutes from the meetings, and then notification of the videotapes when they're placed. It's a good way to stay informed of what's going on, even if you aren't able to attend the meeting. So I'd like to recognize that. There's also handouts in the back there relative to the May happenings in EDH. So if you didn't get a copy of that, those are back there if you choose to grab one of those. So with that, I'm going to move on to item 2. Does anybody on the Leadership Council have any proposed changes to the agenda, the way it's laid out? Okay, so seeing none, we'll assume that's approved, that's submitted. And we'll move on to public comment. So this is the opportunity that's always available to anyone in the community who would like to talk about or ask a question on something that is not on today's agenda or tonight's agenda. You're certainly welcome to do that. I know we have one resident who's here who wanted to talk on an item, but please step up and use the microphone so we can hear you. It makes it much easier on the videotape in particular and other things. So please introduce yourself and let us know what you're thinking.
Thank you, I'm just in time.
Yeah.
I'm Steve Ferry, and I'm heading up the effort for cityhood. We have a meeting next Wednesday night, the 29th at 6:30 at the Chief's residence up here on Wilson Way. Looking forward to anybody that'd like to come out and hear what's going on. That'd be great. We'd love to have you there. Thank you. And offhand, our guest speaker is Sheriff
D'Agostini?
John D'Agostini, and he's going to be talking about our police services that will be offered through the city and what he's going to be offering to us. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Okay, and I think Regina wanted to speak too, so if you want to just come forward and use the microphone.
I should have worn my heels.
I think it comes out if you want to just use the portable part of it, not in the stand. Just pull out. There you go. That's easier. Yeah.
I am here to represent my neighborhood. I live in Crown Village, and I live at the end of Crown Village where it says end. We've noticed high amounts of traffic and speeding going through that little end road. As neighbors, we've all been talking. No one is asking for the road to be closed, and we're just asking for some sort of signs letting folks know the speed limit, to slow down. Just on Crown Village alone, there are 16 children under the age of 7, and so it's very concerning, including my children. But it's concerning with the speeds that are going through the neighborhood.
So thank you for contacting Chief Lowley as leader of kind of our public safety. And as I mentioned to you, I have spoken with the Lieutenant Commander of the CHP, and I hope to be able to sit down with him and talk about a couple of problematic areas to bring it to their attention. So we'll make sure that gets back to DOT and the CHP. So thank you for your comment.
And definitely call the CHP if you ever have speeding concerns. They're not an emergency line. They're very responsive. They track those complaints. And you've done that.
I did.
Did you notice any outcome from that, just for our benefit?
No, they said
Not
it
yet.
wasn't their jurisdiction.
Did they really?
That's good, yeah.
Okay, we can talk about that.
Is that a private road?
No, it's a public road. It's maintained by the county. So I'm surprised today
Yeah,
you're telling me that.
that's what I was.
Maybe we need to talk about jurisdictions with them, because it is their jurisdiction. Unless there's some caveat, I'm not aware of.
Thank you.
But thank you, Regina. Okay.
Thank you.
Anyone else who would like to address Lenny?
Thank you, Supervisor Meadow and Commission. I came to you in April with some concerns. You took care of it. You were very thorough. I got an email from Cindy in 2 days stating 2 of the 3 problems had been taken care of. One problem still has not been taken care of. I'm talking about the memory care pavilions, the memory care center at Green Valley and Francisco. I walked the grounds today. I walked them 2 months ago. They stayed there finished with this project. I invite any of you to drive by at Green Valley and tell me that landscape is finished. It is unacceptable what they have done as far as the landscape goes on Green Valley. Please drive by, and I think you'll agree with me. I'm not being overactive or anything like that. This is the problem we have. These developers come in, and I've been here since the beginning, you know that, John, and committee, and they say, we're going to cut down all these oak trees and everything, but we're going to put up more oak trees, and this site is going to be beautiful. We believe them. And I wish I would have kept one of their pictures, because I strictly remember a lawn area all the way to Green Valley with flowers. Now they have left that rough, they haven't re-wept. Please drive by it. So what I would like you to do is re-invite the developer back to APAC to explain to us why the Green Valley side of their complex has not been landscaped. It is unacceptable. They should not be allowed to open until that is done. It is nothing like what the pictures have said. Please drive by it if you haven't seen it. Sorry for being so negative. Now, on a bright note, I'll just let you guys know if you don't know yet. It's kind of good news. Terry Halverson and I walked the center medians 2 weeks ago, and out of all the trees we planted, we removed the sycamores. Out of all the trees we planted, we only lost 5 oak trees. Those 5 are going to be replaced. You'll see yellow flags by. You'll see the trees dead, but you'll see a yellow flag by. Those are going to be replaced, and also 3 other non-oak trees that have been hit by cars in the last year. So we're going to replace 8 of trees that need to be replaced. And then further on down the line, from Francisco down to Green Valley, it was never a real big landscape job. We're going to try to spruce that up and plant about 5 or 6 more oak trees in that area. So we got pride and everything's looking good in Dorado Hills. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Lenny. And I did drive by recently and looked, and there's a lot of weeds out there. The thing I wasn't able to define without talking to DOT is where the right-of-way ends and where the private property starts, and whether it's under the vegetation management.
That was my concern.
So I've got to follow up on that part.
That was my concern. I'm afraid they're going to come back and say, oh, that last 20 feet to the sidewalk is county property or something. But I strictly remember the pictures, and they had a lawn going all the way to Green Valley. It just doesn't look finished. It doesn't look good. And we should hold these developers accountable for what they say they're going to do in our community.
Hey, Lenny, John's got a comment.
Sure. Did you talk to the planning department? Because they sign off on the landscaping plans.
I should not have to contact the planning department. I mean, you guys drive by it. We have a planning commission. They did not do what they said they were going to do.
I know Cindy was working. I don't know the details. Unfortunately, she's not here, but I'll follow up on that because she's right.
Yeah, I'm just letting you know that the planning department, they're the ones who sign off on not only on the plans, but on the installation. Okay?
Very good. Any other public comment this evening? Okay, then seeing none more, I'd like to move on to item 4, our guest speaker, and it's my pleasure to introduce Janelle Horn. She's our recently elected El Dorado County Recorder Clerk. She replaced Bill Schultz, who had been in office for 20-something years, 24 years. But I'm pleased to say that Janelle has been able to take kind of a fresh look at the Recorder Clerk's office and is talking about some changes and some things, some observations. So we invited her to come out and kind of share the first 5 months of her experience as an elected official and what she sees for the future, and just kind of open the dialogue. So thank you again for your participation.
Thank you, Supervisor Heidel, for inviting me to speak to your community this evening. Just for those who are unaware what the Recorder Clerk's office does, but we are basically the office that are with you from birth to death and everything in between. So basically we process all of your vital documents and your any documents that pertain to real property. So deeds, liens, easements, maps, all of that, and then all of your vital statistics like birth certificates, death certificates, marriage licenses, fictitious business name statements. So our office is very, very busy. We have the public coming in consistently throughout the day, and we are there to serve them and to serve you in any need that you have. I've been very, very busy, kind of jumped in head first into the office when I was elected. We were in the middle of our mid-year budget analyzations, and so I immediately had to give a presentation to the board on what our budget looked like. So in that, I had to compile a lot of information in analyzing the office over the last, I'm going to say 3 to 5 years. And in that, I noticed that there has been a decline in the processing of documents. So initially in the last 3 years by 23.5%. So with that, also the county had done a benchmark study in 2015, which also stated that we were overstaffed at that time based off of those numbers. So from 2015 to 2018, it was very, very apparent that we had more staff than there was work. And then also looking into our new South Tech, our new software system, how that was going to streamline processes, how that was basically going to eliminate these 2 positions. So basically I went to the board pretty soon, I think it was in end of February, beginning of March, and decided that it was in the best interest of the county and our budget to eliminate 2 positions within my department. So, because in the long run, they wouldn't have any work for them. So basically we did that. We also had one employee retire. She'd been there for 34 years. She was a fantastic employee, and she just felt like it was the right time, and we have not refilled that position either. And then we had another person who was on probation, and in analyzing everything, also at the same time decided that we didn't need that one either. So we're still looking. Possibly we've kind of kept those 2 positions open but not filled until we do more studies on what our processes are with our new software system that's coming, soft-tech system that's coming up. So with that, the total cost savings initially for our budget was about $200,000 with eliminating those 2 positions and not filling the other one. So my goal was, when I decided to run for office, was to make sure that there was a great communication between those who utilize the office on a regular basis. So basically your title and escrow companies and your attorneys who process documents as well. So with that, the first change I made was we increased our recording time from 3 o'clock, or our electronic recording time from 3 o'clock to 3:30. Now you might think that a half an hour isn't that big of a difference, but it really is, especially when you're on the other side of closing. A lot of times I come from the lending aspect, so when those wire transfers go out at 2:30 in the afternoon, it's very difficult, and if you're wanting to close that same day, to be able to get it out of the lender's hands into the title and escrow company's hands, and then to be submitted to the recorder clerk. So having that little extra 30 minutes of time really relieves a lot of stress on all ends of the transaction. It keeps the public happy, it keeps the title and escrow companies happy, and it's great to be able to serve them to that capacity. So also, with talking with people and talking with those companies throughout the campaign, I was able to find out that there were some inconsistencies within the office. And so with that, we wanted to make sure that we opened those lines of communication of being transparent and accessible to those companies. So about a month ago, Katrina, my assistant recorder clerk, and I, we decided to do 2 trainings specifically geared towards title and escrow companies. And what we did is we went over government codes, how to calculate fees, and any questions that they had in regards to rejections that they were getting. So we're here to record, we're not here to reject. So we just wanted to make sure that they were able to get their business done that they needed. So we did 1 training here in Placerville, and we had 1 training up in South Lake Tahoe. Also, so that was for title and escrow companies. Then we did 1 for a probate group here in the county that requested us to do 1 special for them as well. So we did that also. So as you probably know, a lot of people love to get married in South Lake Tahoe. So in South Lake Tahoe, we have 7 notaries up there that have been approved to be able to purchase marriage licenses. And basically, they are a representation of our county. And so if you ever go to Chapel of the Bells or any of those types of companies up there to get married, they issue those marriage licenses on behalf of the county. So a lot of times, sometimes there have been errors and inconsistencies on those as well. And so we just wanted to make sure that we were all on the same page. And so we basically did a training for them as well, so that in the long run we are delivering a superb product to our public. Let's see here. So also one of the things that are coming up is last fall the Board of Supervisors requested that our office do a fee study, and so that fee study was done last fall and was submitted to the board in December, and there were some changes that they had recommended to be changed. Not very many of them. It's about 4 or 5 fees out of, we have, I don't know, 20 to 30, so it's not all of our fees that are changing, but just a few. Went to the board on April 30th to get their conceptual approval, and so we are moving forward with being able to have the consulting firm, a hearing for approval, and hopefully that to be, we're looking at June 25th, possibly, with a final implementation on October 1st. So October 1st, I know that seems really far away when we could implement it as soon as 30 days, but with talking with those companies who process those marriage licenses, they're taking reservations now for the rest of the season. So we thought it would be best to accommodate them to do it after the season in October. Let's see here. So a little bit in regards to our software conversion. We are right in the middle of it right now. We actually have South Tech here for the next 10 days. So they are basically installing all of that software onto our servers, and they're going to be conducting training, probably starting tomorrow or the next day. So this new system is going to be a very robust system. We are transferring from AdPack, which is a 20-year-old system that is not very user-friendly. So in that, we are going to be able to have kiosks in the lobby for people to fill out their applications for whether it be a fictitious business name or applications to obtain a marriage license or any copies. And we're eliminating that paper, and so it'll be all paperless system. It'll be saving time, and it'll be really great for the public. We also, with that transition, currently, if we have some subscriptions so like engineers or surveyors within our county, they obtain maps on DVD, which is, they come in quarterly to purchase these DVDs, and they have to purchase the whole DVD set. So we talked to IT to see if they can put that together on more of a web service for us, and they did that, and so that will be coming out with our new South Tech system, that they can sign up for a subscription service, so that as they're out in the field and surveying, that they can go online with their subscription service and get those copies of those maps that they need. So that's going to be coming up here within the next month or so. Some of my goals that I'd like to do is, and which we're continuing to do, is just efficiencies within the office to see what are the steps that we're taking that don't necessarily need to be taken. Increasing the workflow of how we serve the public. So in that, in this next year, with my salary savings, I asked if it would be okay to be able to make those changes of moving how our office flow is. Because right now it's very confusing to the public when they first come in, they get in line, they think that they're standing in the right line to be, oh, well, you need to be in the next room over. So hopefully we're going to streamline that process. We're going to be cross-training everyone so that everyone will be able to serve anybody who comes into the office. So that's going to be coming up here within this next, I'd say 6 months to a year. And then one other thing that I wanted to talk about, which I just want you to be aware of, a goal that I would like to do is our book preservation project and map preservation project. Some of our books and our maps have been well loved and used, and bindings are falling off and different things like that. So just making sure that they're preserved for future generations to come and organize them all. And that's something that I would like to look into in the future, and maybe getting the public involved in that as well. So if you have any old homesteads from your family way back when, and that signature is in there, or any mining claims possibly that your family had, maybe that would be look like a book maybe that you would maybe want to help preserve, and we could do a special memorandum for you and dedication to whoever preserved that book. So that's something that we're looking at, tossing around the idea, but just wanted to give you an update on that as well. So I am definitely open to any questions that anybody has in regards to the office. If anybody has any questions for me.
I have one for you.
Yes.
Just you made me think, as you're talking about these vital documents and these old books that you have are very important to people's records. What happens if, let's say, you have a fire or a flood or something in there? Is there a way of backing that up?
Yes. So basically, per code, per statute, we are required to have another physical document. So everything, as you guys probably remember, the old microfilm, microfiche, we actually still have to do that. And so yes, so that is our backup. Plus now, every time that a lot of our documents come digitally and we scan them all in, so we have that digital process as well. But that's something that our preservation project that is really neat. There's a company called CoFile that we're looking at, and what they do is they take the acid out of the paper, they put them in a really nice sleeve, and then they put it in a leather-bound, fireproof, waterproof, safe box. But they're really beautiful on the outside, and so we don't have that now, and it is very expensive. So it may just have to be the ones that are in the worst condition and that type of thing. But yeah, thank you for the question.
Does your office supply the records of purchase prices of recent sales of homes to the Sacramento Bee? Does that come out of your office?
No, that doesn't. Actually, I had somebody ask me that several months ago because they weren't publishing El Dorado County. And basically, I contacted the Bee to find out where they get that documentation, and they said that they get it from a third party. So whether that third party gets it from Metro List or one of the other companies, they said that it wasn't actually the county.
So thank you.
Would that be the same for business licenses? I know that, like
Business
the Business Journal
license?
publishes those.
Yes, so the business license, not the license part, but we process the fictitious business name statement. You can look up business licenses online through the El Dorado County website, as well as the fictitious business name statements.
So I have a question. One of the powers of the recorder clerk is to marry people.
Yes.
Have you been approached to provide that service as of yet?
I am in the office quite a bit,
Yep.
and so anytime that the staff needs some help, if they're busy, I actually have had people come in that I know, and they didn't realize I do that as well, and so they've asked me to perform their marriage ceremonies for them. It's a very, very special time. It's really fun, and I was just and so all of the ones that I've done so far have just been at the county, but I was approached recently to do one off-site.
Okay.
So actually that will be coming up soon with the fair.
Very good, very good. I know Bill Schultz used to kind of revel in those things because that was a special entitlement that was given to the recorder clerk and all other elected officials, but not everybody, so to speak, who's an elected official category. So that's kind of a nice touch.
It is.
Yep.
It's very moving, especially when the public and they write their own vows, and it's just so heart-moving. And so a little thing that I actually did in the office, because a lot of people don't have money to spend for a $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 wedding, so they come to the office. So we created like a little kind of cheap, but little photo booth area where they can come and take some pictures, and so it looks nice.
Very nice.
Yeah.
The other thing is CCNR amendments, because having worked down here with the Community Services District on those kinds of things, and I know there's some activities going on to amend CCNRs, but that's something that has to be recorded through the recorder clerk. It has to be properly recorded. We did that, for instance, when we modified the CCNRs for units 2, 3, and 4 Lake Hills Estates, and worked with Bill and the staff at the time. Got all that accomplished, but I know those are going to be continuing demands, and I keep referring them to your office to make sure that they understand from a notary perspective what's required. Because the last thing you want is people go out and circulate petitions and stuff and then come back and be told, well, we can't accept this because it hasn't been properly notarized as to the validity of the signatures, all those kinds of things. So
it's a big job
It is.
to change the CCNR, so you have to get everybody's signature within that community, so.
yeah, well, it depends on the CCNR. Some
Yeah,
of them
it depends
require
on how
2/3,
it is,
50%, but
Yeah.
you better get extras because some of them probably you'll find out they were a renter, not an owner, and the renter can't sign it, and all those kinds of things. So, any other questions for Janelle? Yeah, Joe's got one.
You mentioned when you walked in that you found there had been a 23% decline in documents
Yes,
that you were processing.
yes.
Was that because of economic downturn or the more of going towards online processing?
No, it was actually both electronic and physical documents. It was a total of a 23.5% decline. And I would take that from the lack of building of homes. People are staying in their properties now more than they did before. And so, yeah, it's just how it's been. And we've even noticed just this year that it's even slowed down even more than normal. But I would take that it has to do with the economy and specifically here to El Dorado County. But I'm part of the CERTNA board, which is our California Electronic Systems Board, and all counties across the state of California are seeing a decrease.
Thank you.
Very good. Last call. Well, thank you, Janelle, for sharing with us the information you had. Welcome aboard to the county.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for the invite.
Okay, I'm going to cover a couple things very quickly here for the supervisor's communications. I think most people who've been following a lot of the news media and stuff recognize that we have a new ordinance at the county, the Vegetation Management Ordinance. And we work with our local fire departments across the county to implement this. I was originally told that it was probably a 60-day effectiveness, so it turns out it's only 30. So it becomes effective on May 30th, the end of this month. So we are going to start taking complaints at the county and looking at how we can possibly follow up on those, work with the local fire departments, work with the current staffing we have under code enforcement, and try to do a better job of really getting the properties cleaned up that don't have defensible space and working on that. So I know there's an active program in El Dorado Hills. It changes a little bit this year. The new requirement was limbing up of all, on vacant lots, limbing up of all ladder fuels up to 6 feet off the ground, I think, and stuff. So I got the notification and had to go out there and get the chainsaw going and do some work. But that was okay. I appreciate the notification and stuff. But obviously the biggest concern right now is with these late rains. You clean everything up and then it all grows back. And so, and for a lot of us, I think we recognize there's going to have to be at least one more cycle of clearing out the vegetation, the weeds in particular, and trying to get that cleaned up before we get into the real heated part of the summer. So if you have any questions, I have that ordinance available here if anybody would like to reference some of the specific sections. But again, the full implementation at the county won't be for a year, so the primary focus right now is working with the local agencies, working with CAL FIRE, who has the lead for most of this, but then also following up on a complaint basis where we can. So, second thing, the Costco update. Unfortunately, there's no new news.
I have a question.
Yeah, okay, sorry, go ahead.
Does that apply to your county properties? And if it does, what is going on to take care of those properties?
It does apply to the county properties, and a lot of that ends up being DOT right-of-way and stuff, so we are trying to do the vegetation management as much as possible. So there's a concerted effort to make all those things happen, but like BLM land or federal land, it's going to take a while to really get all that done. So with the ordinance coming into effect, we don't have contractors that are standing at the ready to go out to work. So it'll be a period of time where we're going to have to take the highest risk areas first and start working those, and that's kind of what DOT's been asked to do is, again, operate off of complaints to the extent the complaint is valid. but then clean up things as we have the time available. So there's no new staff in DOT, for instance, to do that. So we have to do the best we can with what current staffing is. Okay, on Costco, the word I've got is that there is no decision from the standpoint of the two proponents involved as to how this is actually going to be laid out, but there is ongoing discussions, and the two proponents are Costco themselves and then EDH 52, and that they've been looking at site optimization primarily. How do you get the best yield out of the two sites? As most of us recognize, it's on the north side of Highway 50 off of Sullivan Valley Parkway, but there's property on both the east side and the west side. The east side was defined as being the warehouse area for Costco, and as I understand it, they're now revisiting what would have to be done to include the fueling island on that side. But there's no final agreement, there's nothing more that we can share other than the discussions are ongoing, so it's not over. Some of the stuff you read in social media, I gotta guard you, it's garbage. So people are declaring things that aren't real, please take that with a grain of salt when you read stuff on social media, because it's ongoing discussions, and at some point I fully expect the full press release and stuff with the end result. So stay tuned, I guess is all I can say at this point. Any other questions on that? I can't answer them anyway, so. Okay, County Charter Section 504. The board just had a discussion on this. And again, on social media, there's a lot of misrepresentation and confusion. It was quoted that when the county charter was passed in 1994, so this goes back 25 years, that it was only the deputy sheriffs and the lower level people were included in 504, and that's absolutely false. I have 504 in front of me. It includes the undersheriff, captains, lieutenants, sergeants, deputy sheriffs, and clerks. So I wish people would take the time to really read what's in these documents, the charter and stuff, as opposed to putting stuff on social media that's just absolutely wrong. So one of the decisions the board had to decide was whether or not to increase the sheriff's salary, because he's currently making approximately the same but slightly less than the undersheriff, and that's all driven by the voter-approved charter from 25 years ago. So unless the charter has changed, everything but the exception of the sheriff is controlled by that. And what it amounts to is the charter says an average salary shall be determined for these particular positions based upon what the average annual salary is for South Lake Tahoe Police Department, the Amarillo County Sheriff's Department, and California Highway Patrol. So the voters approved this to take that mix. And what it's really doing is causing some conflicts with the board's approach of trying to get all of the salary personnel within a given percentage of what the median is. We're trying to get everybody within 10% of the median if they've been underpaid based upon the comp numbers. So that's part of it. This kind of goes in opposition to that. I believe there was really good reason at the time this was passed for it to be here. But as a lot of things occur with the passage of time, you have to go back and look at it. Is this still the right approach? So it is basically the charter. We abide by it. But people were complaining because some of the board, it wasn't unanimous, elected to give the sheriff an additional amount of money to make sure he was making more than the undersheriff. He has a staff of 380 people. It's a big organization. It's not the kind of thing, in my opinion, you can ignore. But again, it's driven by a lot of other factors. So that's what's going on with the charter. I have likewise the wording here if anybody's interested in that. Two more things I'd like to add very quickly. Temporary sign enforcement. And these include your political signs. There's changes going on in the county now, and they're actually discussions. It isn't a formal change, but talking about basically not allowing any temporary signage within the right-of-way period. If it is within the county right-of-way, it'll be removed, the signs and the posts. No notification to the public, because a lot of this ends up being advertising for businesses who are just putting signs up everywhere. It becomes sign proliferation. So there is a move to change that, to basically say if you have for instance, a business sign you want to put up, or if you have a political sign you have to put up, it really has to be on private property. You have to have the private property owner's permission. So I think that's going to change a lot of the signage we see around. It's not final yet, but that's what's being proposed. So if anybody has any particular experience with temporary signs and either liking them or not liking them, please contact my office and let me know what your opinion is, because I told Greg that I'd feed it back to him. But my personal position is I'd rather not have all that signage up. I think it's a distraction, and it really kind of clutters things up. So even from a political signage standpoint, if we can clean that up a little bit and limit the number of locations political signs are stored at, I think it's better for us overall from an environmental perspective and just from a visibility aesthetics perspective. So if you have any thoughts on that, please let me know. The last thing I want to cover very quickly, because we just got it today, is an announcement that our 911 system will be operational effective May 31st, the end of this month. And I just going to say 911, 211, excuse me, 211. So 211 is the equivalent to 911 for health services. So if you have a situation where you're dealing with somebody who has a mental illness, some kind of scene or situation, and you don't know who to call to get help, the 211 number will be the referral that goes into a dispatch type center, and then they'll determine the appropriate services to render, how to deal with it, whether it ends up, going to law enforcement or whoever it goes to. But I think once we have this established and out there, people will recognize the value of the 211 system. So there is a cost to it, but I think it's a huge benefit for people who witness something going on and want to tell somebody about it and get help but don't know who to call, right? This is a central number, 211, and it's operated like the CHP dispatches on the 911 calls. So we look forward to that starting very soon, and we'll see how successful that is. So those are the 5 items I wanted to cover. So yeah.
John, could you clarify? That's not a medical emergency.
No. But from a mental health perspective in particular, a lot of people don't know where to get mental health services, particularly for family members. And Josh, I'm sure, deals with this. They end up taking them, the emergency room. This person's having a mental breakdown or whatever. They're doing injury or harm to themselves. And for somebody who suspects that somebody needs help before that actual emergency that goes to the emergency room happens, this is the number you would call to find out what are the county services available, what does the state have going, what are the best paths to try to get somebody in to get assistance as opposed to waiting until something happens, right? That's a worse situation. So I know it's been applied in other counties and they found it to be very, very helpful, but it's really just a referral. It's a dispatch thing to refer you to, these are the services that are available, here's the number you want to call. Yeah, and I'm sure there's application forms and everything else that goes with it. But Josh, are you familiar with any of the 211 in other counties?
Yeah, 211, 411, I mean, there's different kind of mechanisms that drive it. 211 is just kind of our version of that. But if you really think about it, when someone shows up to the emergency department, I work at UC Davis, but also at the VA, a lot of times it's kind of directing traffic to kind of where people need to go. And had they called someone that could kind of broker that relationship earlier on, would obviate the need for an emergency department visit, but also get them closer to the service they need. So a lot of this boils down to mental health services. But yeah, it's a real critical resource for us. It seems basic, like you just be able to Google these things, but it's not that basic to kind of know where to go and the numbers to kind of direct traffic. So it's a good addition for our county.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments on these? Yeah, let's go back here first.
The cost that you mentioned for the 211 program, is that borne by the community or is that through the county?
It comes out of the county general fund, so we've authorized funding through Health and Human Services. I don't think there's state funding for this. It's something each county adopts separately. There may be some state grants to get you started. I'm not clear of all of that. But the bottom line is it's a contract services. It isn't very expensive to operate. It's a 24/7, 365. It just gets you a lot better responsiveness and documentation of what's going on and what could possibly prevent a major event, including a suicide, right? That's one of the things that comes up. And we all know, I think, that the suicide rate of our teenagers is increasing dramatically. The mental illness rate of teenagers is increasing dramatically from the historical numbers. And so that's a concerning thing. But if somebody sees something that's in that vein, there's a number now that you can call that hopefully will get you directed in terms of how to get that person help if it's really a situation like that. That's kind of the way I view it. It's a starting point. It's not a conclusion, but at least something gets recorded and there should be a referral that results from it. So.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well,
I think you might have just answered it, but who's answering these lines? Is it a private contractor?
Yes. It is a private contractor the county has contracted with, and they've operated other 211 systems. So their expertise, their training and stuff is set up for just this type of an operation. So we don't have county staff doing that. It's a system, and that's why we need feedback from the community if it's helpful or not, right? Because as you know, it ends up being the person who answers the phone that's either very helpful and knowledgeable, or they send you the wrong direction and you just run this loop and don't get anywhere. So we're hoping that with working with our Health and Human Services, then some public feedback, that if it isn't working well to start out with, we can get it refined to where it does.
So should that, just with the confusion of 211 coming on and 911,
Right.
should they get to the wrong number, is there a means to get them back to the primary answering point where it should be rather than in a larger system?
That I don't know. We'd have to look at the training, because I don't know if they have from a 211 call that they determine is really a 911 call, if they have the ability to transfer it over directly, or if they have to have a person on the line make that call. But that's a good question. We haven't gotten that far into it, but that's, yeah.
I would just put that on your list. That's kind of a critical point.
Yes.
You might get one opportunity to make that phone call, they might not call back.
Right, particularly in a certain situation, yeah. Okay, Joel.
Do you have a go live date on the 211?
It's May 31st, so.
They have a website, 211eldorado.org.
Yes. And there's going to be a press release out on this that provides a lot more information. This was just an advance notification, but the unveiling is May 31st. Let's see, the go live date is June 1st. I'm reading it here. The go live date is June 1st. The press release is May 31st, so the day before. But June 1st is the official start date. So. Okay, with that, then I think we'll go ahead and progress on, and we'll go to the leadership team progress reports. And I'd like to introduce Lieutenant Lance Bryant, who's here from our Sheriff's Department. And Lance, if you use the microphone, you can use it here or use it there any way you want, so that we can kind of hear the comments, because in the past, with the video recording, we've had difficulty, picking up the voices and stuff. So if you can kind of share with us the information you have, that'd be great.
That's fine. So, Lieutenant Lance Bryant, I'm assigned to operations. So myself and Lieutenant Troy Morton are in charge of West Slope Patrol. We supervise that portion. So, I know that Detective Alex Morton, I guess he was here last time, am I correct?
Mm-hmm.
He's one of our detectives, and he couldn't make it today, so I was asked last minute to come in here and give you guys our latest crime statistics. So I reached out to our crime analyst, and we continue in the El Dorado Hills area to see a rise, or at least a substantial amount of auto burglaries. And we're finding that most of these burglaries are a result of people coming up from Sacramento, and it's a crime of opportunity. They're walking through neighborhoods, checking door handles, and then finally, boom, they find one that's open, and they get in, and you have your auto burg. And then the other thing that we're finding too is residents that are just leaving things out in plain view. A cell phone, a purse, a backpack, whatever it is, that's what attracts the attention. So if the door doesn't work, then you might see a window smash, and then they're inside the car. So the best thing that we could advise your neighbors and your community here is just be vigilant about locking the door. Times have changed, and then leaving things out. Keep them out of plain view, and at least you're going to lessen the likelihood of you being the victim if you've taken those steps. A couple other things. We had a rash, I can't say a rash, but a few burglaries where we had a suspect entering open, unlocked sliding glass doors over in I can't think of the name, the apartment complex over on the other side of the town center. Valley. And it turned out, in fact, it was Detective Morton who was able to work the case, connected it to some burglaries over in Folsom, and wrote a search warrant. He got the suspect into custody, and also has an arrest warrant for the suspect's girlfriend. So the warrant, I think it was out in North Island somewhere, where he's actually able to make the connection. So that hopefully has been put to rest. I don't know how long ago the last meeting was, but we had a person that was posing as a peace officer and had committed some armed robberies. We were able to figure out who that was. That person's now in custody. So that's the overall, crime trends. I figured I'd leave it open to any questions. If anybody has any questions at this point?
Yeah, there was There was a gentleman who impersonated an ICE agent at the Safeway development that was on the news about a month ago. Are you familiar with that?
I think that's the same person.
Okay.
I have to look at it.
It was a fellow from Dorado Hills, but he was doing it, I think, in Cameron Park and also there at.
There was two separate instances.
Yeah.
Where he had
By the
done
same
this.
individual?
I think it was. Bear with me, I'll look it up.
What was he doing? Was he asking for money?
Yeah, it looks like he, went after some money at one point. Yeah, he posed as an ICE agent. He had a shirt with an ice on the front. At the same time, he demanded $50 from the victims. And turned out he was a convicted felon.
What was the other location? You know, if you don't.
Leonard Holmes?
What's that?
Lennar Holmes.
So evidently he went into there and impersonated an officer too. So these are real, just general descriptions of the crime. That was the same person.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, I've raised this with Supervisor Heidel previously. For those of us who have home alarms, we receive a billing from the Sheriff's Department for an annual fee for permitting to have an alarm. It recently went up from $10 a year to $25 a year. I'm not sure how it was justified at the Board of Supervisors, but I don't know what the increase in costs would justify a $15 increase when just the possession of it is all we're talking about. Additionally, there was a schedule of penalties that has been sent to each affected homeowner relative to false alarms and responses, etc. to go with that. I don't know if you're familiar with that alarm program, but is there any information available why the permit fee had to be increased?
I have no information on that, and I apologize.
Yeah, well,
I don't know if that's driven by the sheriff's office or another county entity.
It's sent to the sheriff's office.
I know the board asked the CFO for the sheriff's department to look at whether or not the fees were paying for the cost of service. Because there had been some information that was presented that says, no, they're not. We're subsidizing those kinds of things out of other funds as opposed to the user. So we emphasized that they needed to relook at all that. And the biggest thing that was presented to the board is false alarms. And I guess there's some people that don't seem to take the appropriate action to correct whatever defect is in their alarm system. And so the sheriff responds to numerous false alarms at the same place all the time. And so we said, in those kind of situations, we believe you have to impose the fines. You have to get to the point where people recognize they have a personal responsibility to keep their alarm system operating correctly. The contractor they go through, right? But the county, the sheriff's office shouldn't be responding to things that are repeated false alarms and pretty much known to be false alarms, but they have to go anyway because it takes them away from other duties. So that's what the emphasis from the board was all about.
But that is separate and apart.
Correct.
Because those are penalties
Right.
for, you might say, negligence.
Right.
Now I'm talking about is what is the cause for an increase relative to me just possessing the alarm in my house that they have a record of.
Right, so we'd have to go to the CFO for the sheriffs, but my guess is they're going to say the administrative costs, since those were put into play, the $10 fee was put in place, 15 years ago? It increased at 3.5% or 5% a year, and now it's worth $25 worth of admin time to process. I don't know. We'd have to ask the CFO, but that's my guess. But I can take that to the CFO and try to get you a specific answer.
It just seems I can't appreciate why.
What the genuine cost is.
What the continuing cost is. That's
$40 in Folsom. It's $40 in Folsom.
I don't live in Folsom. I live in Elmore Hills.
Right.
I don't feel better because of it.
It's been $10 since the 90s, if I remember
It's not
correctly.
as bad as you think.
So we can look into it further, Dick, but
It just seems,
Yep.
right.
Fair enough.
Yes, sir.
Do you happen to know how many hours that your deputies are actually in El Dorado Hills per week or per month?
No, I do not. I know that we assign our deputies basically proportional to crime statistics, and they follow those closely, but I couldn't tell you how many hours. And I know it will vary from week to week, just depending on calls for service. Right now, we're short, I saw the report this morning, we're down 17 patrol deputies as far as staffing. So deputies are more reactive than proactive right now, trying to keep up with the calls for service.
So that 17 is out vacations and I think they're just generally
We need bodies. Yeah, that's pretty much par for the course across all law enforcement. It's just hard to find people that.
There's vacancies in employment right now, so. All right, very good. You content? Appreciate it. I will make one other comment since we're kind of talking law enforcement. I did reach out to Matt Stover, who's our CHP commander, and asked him if he'd be willing to come down and be a guest speaker and talk about some of their enforcement things, because this is where you get into the neighborhood situation where people are speeding. Via Belartia has been a long-standing item that the fire department has got involved, and we've had talks with the city of Folsom to try to figure out how we best mitigate that situation, and the opening of the connection between Saratoga and Iron Point is going to be a major part of that. But we've got kind of an agreement right now that says here's the things we're going to go through, and as a case of last resort, if we find that the situation doesn't get substantially better after some period of time that new connection's been opened, that the county will then look at other traffic calming measures to try to get people primarily to slow down on that cut through, because there's a lot of speeding that goes on. I guess the city police in Folsom have done citations. So I wanted to talk to Matt about what his history on the Dorado County side is, that form of vehicle code enforcement in an unincorporated area comes from the California Highway Patrol. It doesn't come from our sheriff's office. So that's something a lot of people don't understand. It's not the sheriff's responsibility to do that. It's CHP's responsibility for unincorporated areas. You have an incorporated town, city, then it's the city police or town police. So we're still working on that. Hopefully Matt will get back to me and identify a date that he can come and he can share kind of his approach to things, because like a lot of the agencies, they don't have enough staff to do everything they'd like to do. But, so we'll talk about priorities and what he can do. And my approach has always been to tell him where we think hot spots are, and if they can go do some patrolling for even a week or something, rather than issue some citations where people are repeatedly speeding or running stoplights or stop signs or whatever it is. Maybe it gets a little better for a short period of time, but they can't sit there all the time. Recognize that. So that's something hopefully will be upcoming. And with that, why don't we grab the microphone here and just pass it down, because we're going to go to committee member comment. We have a invitation this evening. They can't. Mike starts. You sure? Always say there we go.
Okay. Well, thank you again, Mike Lilienthal, Fire Department. You have Fire Chief Mo Johnson here too. He's been active with the Community Council. He comes to most of our meetings as well. Chief joins us from Sacramento Fire for 28 years, and he's been at the helm since January, making some great changes. One thing we're focused on in the Chief's direction is wildland risk reduction, and we're very concerned about that. Obviously, it's an issue in California. It's an issue with our fuels. It's an issue with management. Fortunately, in El Dorado Hills, we've been very proactive over the years with this, with vacant lot management. We upped that a little bit this year, got a little more aggressive. That's a lot of what the Chief's trying to bring to the table, is just continuing to work on that fire problem. And the reason I bring it up is it's something you could do yourselves to protect yourself, and we need that. We have to partner with the community for this issue. So vacant lots next to you, if you see a problem on your lot, give yourself that 100-foot defensible space around your house. And if you have issues you're not sure, you can always call us. We have a fire prevention community risk reduction division, and we're willing to come help you. We're willing to look at your house, your property, give you some suggestions if you're not sure what to do. Feel free to call us on that. So, and with the late rains, and the supervisor had already brought it up, obviously we're going to get into more grass growing again, because now we've kicked off enough water to allow that grass to grow again. So it's going to be an interesting year from that perspective. Once summer does come, if it comes, and things will heat up and things will dry out. So give yourself and your families that protection. Let us know if you have a concern. You're not going to bother us. We take calls all the time. We will send somebody out to take a look at your issue. Other than that, nothing too much from the fire department, unless you have questions about what we're doing. Do you have any questions for me?
Down here, Mike. Yes, sir.
I got a question for you. Fire insurance has been on the mind of a lot of people, obviously, on the community. I'm curious the conversations you're hearing as you go out and you're doing this work as to how we can best tie fire insurance to kind of land management as a way to promote that.
Yeah, great question. We are having a lot of problems with our residents, especially in the more rural areas, getting fire insurance. We get phone calls, I wouldn't say daily, but certainly weekly, if not more often, from people saying, hey, my insurance company just dropped me. Or I'm paying triple what I used to pay. So people are paying $6,000 or $7,000 a year, especially in some of the more remote areas with fire insurance. From a fire department's perspective, there's not a lot we can do to influence that problem. It's an insurance industry loss issue. And certainly they're looking at California and they're not too excited about protecting properties. But what you can do, always still I go back to, is your own clearance requirements. Generally speaking, the insurance companies look at your lot, they look at your trees, they look at what's overhanging your roof lines, they look at your clearance. So you can proactively help yourself by doing that. And then I certainly encourage you to reach out to us when there are those issues. And some of the times we're able to help educate insurance companies and help the customer, help our citizens. It doesn't always work, to be clear, but we do certainly try where we can to influence that if there's legitimate plans in place to protect those properties, which there are a lot of. Definitely an issue. Anything else?
If you like. Okay, we're going to quickly review it, our May APAC meeting, which we have on May 8th. And beginning of June, we'll tell you about our June agenda, the next community council meeting. But on May 8th, John Vega was kind enough to scan in for Supervisor Heinall, and he addressed a few issues. One of them he'll address here tonight. Another one was sort of the review of the county general accident report and study, and this is an internal document that he shared some information with us about. We also have a guest speaker, Ms. Connie Festo, the Director of Parks and Planning from the Dorado CSD, and she had a discussion about the Carson Creek Heritage Plan park concepts, and that's down off of Carson Crossing in the south part of Dorado Hills. We had several members from the Heritage Dorado Hills HOA attend and provide feedback to that, because the park has been planned for a long time, but it was planned before most of those residents purchased. So they're kind of surprised. It's a community park outside their gates. They wanted to know and try to think it's their entrance. So there's a lot of feedback on that, a lot of back and forth. And they're to be working together with the CSD to develop those conversations. We also had a review, a presentation rather, on Creekside Village, which is a new proposed specific plan on old business park property that was de-annexed. It's 207 acres. They're looking at coming before the board this summer, June, July. Basically, they're taking a bunch of that R&D and industrial land that was de-annexed, and they're looking to rezone it, realize a specific plan, and their goal really is to look for something that's more attainable in terms of housing. They don't anticipate it being a gated community. They anticipate it being affordable is not the right word, attainable, whether it's either a starter home for young families that want to work in the business park, because there's a need down there that the business park community, the owners and the businesses, they've identified that need because they can't find any place for their employees to live in Dorado. But it will also be a move-down community. They'll have some lower densities that match sort of Blackstone, and they'll have some higher densities that are more affordable. As such, they had a few items in there where they have some park land set aside, but they also have an opportunity to use a little bit of the park space they have on the north side of their project that will connect to the John Adams Academy, and maybe perhaps program a multi-use field that the CSD will help them with. And it'll make for more park space, and it'll be more essentially field space for that school. Then they also have a bunch of hiking trails, bicycle trails, and a lot of connectivity to the other trail facilities down in the southern part of Dorado Hills. There'll be one new road into that project that we're proposing right now. It'll be across from Royal Oaks, which is on the other side of Blackstone. It'll be just a little bit north of the Wetzel Oviatt Road at the end of the business park. We also had a subcommittee report on the Dorado Hills Folsom Self-Storage, the proposed project. It's at Sophia Parkway, Shadowfax Lane along Green Valley Road. And essentially the subcommittee recommended conditional approval of that project. We had some concerns with traffic mitigations and several parts of it that we feel that they'd probably be adequately addressed. That specific project is very low traffic impact. They anticipate no more than 12 customers a day coming in and out of that. So in terms of what that is zoned for and what they could put in there, restaurants, services, businesses, anything commercial, it's a lot lower traffic impact. So we were keen on the numbers they presented for that. They have another project next door that will probably be higher use, and we'll talk about when that project becomes real. One of the other concerns we had with that project was the landscaping of mature plants to sort of mask the vertical elements of the wall. It's going to be a long wall around the entire project. And they have a kind of an aggressive plan for landscaping. We asked that they use more mature plants and more vertical to hide the wall. And then the other item we had, Connie Fessler from CSP also talked about the digital alignment sign that they're in the process of seeking approvals for. It'll be right here at the corner at Harvard and Eldorado Boulevard. And right now, the sign they have out right now, what they put posters and everything else on, technically not in compliance with the county sign ordinance. It's a little too large, but the plan they have now, they've been working through a planning department. They think they have everything lined up. They're seeking a conditional use permit and a variance. Digital signs are kind of new to the county, and so this will be a new aspect right here inside more of a residential area as opposed to a commercial area down by town center. And really the last thing we talked about was the Country Club Road realignment to Bass Lake Road as part of the Bass Lake Hill specific plan. That was at the Board of Supervisors, I want to say April 23rd. County planning staff is, they were seeking a resolution of necessity basically to proceed with eminent domain on a specific portion. Essentially, that plan was approved in 1996. It's a specific plan, and the alignment of that road was generally along City Lights Drive, which is a gravel road, comes over the top of the Holy Trinity Catholic Church, come down to a new lighted intersection at Bass Lake Road. The goal is to move that traffic north of the freeway because it is a really bad situation down there. It's repeatedly the worst in the county in terms of traffic and queuing. So in 2016, there was an amendment to that specific plan where they moved the road a little bit to the north, and then after that, there was a development agreement, and the developer essentially is looking to move it a little further north. The property owner was willing he already gave easements all along Bass Lake Road. He has multiple properties there, but now he's contesting where they want to put it because it's really dividing one of his parcels in half, and it's against the Seagulls stream, and it's sort of taking the usefulness away from his land. He's not pleased with the appraisal and the price that they've offered for obtaining that, since the developer is essentially charged by the development agreement with obtaining those right-of-ways, and they couldn't obtain it. They came back to the county, and the board did go ahead and vote to generate the resolution of necessity. They did advise them that they'd like to have them work for a few more days. I think it's 3 weeks, and that time was up, I think, last Tuesday. So there's no word on that. But that is
so I have an update on that. Came out today.
Okay.
Before noon.
Oh, okay.
We've reached agreement. There will be no eminent domain. The alignment that's preferred by the county DOT will be followed.
Okay.
They've accepted the appraisal value, so we've been able to get through a lot of those hurdles, and it seems like we're now on a clear course to.
Yeah, because I got that email because we were just going to mention it because at APAC, you just want to present the information. Right. People are asking, why isn't that road done? What's taking so long with that road? And I got an email from the property owner right before, literally, as I left for the meeting. Hey, we'd like to come talk about that. Well, APAC is not a decision maker. So, but they did come down and talk about it, and that's good to hear that it's resolved. And if they hadn't resolved it, if they had realigned or to do a new plan for that road segment, they were anticipating 6 to 9 month delay, which would put us into another year. Get wait for the rain season to be over and construction to be delayed even longer. So that's much needed. And the last thing we talked about really was a quick update. Last year, the county had added Bass Lake Road to the CIP for 4 lanes from Highway 50 north of Serrano Parkway. This year, they revisited that in the CIP. They're only doing the 4 lanes in the CIP from the highway to roughly that new alignment with Country Club. And the rationale on that was that that's sort of the dividing line between the community region and the rural region. The rural region level service E is a trigger for road improvements. In the community region, level service F is. Level service E exists right now in that area, so but it doesn't. So E won't trigger it for the community region, but it does trigger it for the rural. So from the highway to that new alignment is roughly where the 4 lanes. It's in the CIP. It's part of the Westlake Hill specific plan. The developer and the development agreement making those improvements. It's just a matter of changing what's going first. Eventually, north of that will be added back into CIP, but it will depend on those triggers and I don't know who's going to pay for it. So, and that's primarily what we talked about. But we do have a special date for our meeting next month. Instead of the second Wednesday, it'll be June 5th, and it'll be at the fire station. Thank you guys for hosting us on Wilson Way, and we look forward to seeing everybody later. If there's any questions, I hope there's not. So we have meeting minutes. You can look on the website. I'll pass it over to Dick.
I'll be relatively brief, although the topic is rather broad. In March, in the early part of March, the county held a strategic planning meeting, and it was to reassess their focus of needs of the county and how to prioritize the county resources. A meeting was held at the fairgrounds. It was a very large group. I don't think too many of the general public made it there. It was from 9 till noon, and I thought it would be a little bit broader based, but when I attended, I realized that there were a lot of governmental employees at various levels, fire, law enforcement, county employees in various programs and departments. I got there and I sat at the table, and I thought it was the table for just the general public. And as the discussion went on, I discovered that most of the people at the top of the table were people engaged in helping with services to the less fortunate in our community, the mentally handicapped, physically handicapped, and were non-governmental entities, but relied a great deal on governmental support. The context of it, I thought, well, most of the people in attendance are already fully engaged in some aspect of a county service, and it did not surprise me that when they advocated for what was important, they were influenced by that which they dealt with on a routine basis, their particular special interest. And I was questioning a little bit how good this was in getting the pulse of the community versus the pulse of the community service people. And I kind of raised this with John, and then I also discussed it with their public affairs person. And there was the acknowledgement, is I'm quite familiar with, getting the public engaged to participate is a big slope of difficulty in any government engagement with the public. I mean, obviously you don't have to fight for seats here. And so kind of indicative. One of the things that did come out is what Supervisor Heidel does here in his community isn't really being done in any of the other districts. And I think to his credit, he is making a significant outreach. And as an asterisk on this, and it's a warning note here too, is that the social media can almost be as much of a obstacle to good communication of what public needs and interests are as it can be to get the word out. And I think that's one of the challenges that we haven't quite figured out relative to social media. The Board of Supervisors and the Chief Administrative Officer, they did look at the recommendations from this group. And when I saw what their recommendations were, I thought, I think they fully appreciate the arena in which the different ideas were discussed. And at the end of 2.5 hours, people wrote things on big sheets on the walls, and there must have been well over 300 or 400 different comments and ideas and things to do and everything else. But when Mr. Heidel presented the results of what the CAO and the Board of Supervisors looked at in the minutes from the April meeting, I recognized that they kind of, I think, saw from the 500-foot elevation level as to what needed to remain the focus. For those of you who maybe had seen the minutes and not remember them, but the first 5 were responsible growth, broadband communication, county facilities, parks and trails, improved road maintenance and traffic circulation, and attainable housing. Those were the first 5. And also I would make the observation, I saw very little discussion at that meeting relative to how to grow the county's resources, how to encourage investment in the county and growth for employment and supporting residents, etc. And I think that's one of the things that we can tend to overlook is how do we support those things that we want the government to provide us. And there's only so much money to go around, and it goes around very quickly and falls off very quickly. So I thought it was a good effort on the part of the county to reach out, but I think it brings home the point that communicating with your supervisor is really critical, so he has a good sense of the pulse of what things and what's going on. John, if you'd like to make any other comments on that.
No, I think you're right on target, Dick. I mean, it's a big proposition because you have a lot of staff who deliver services. They talk to the residents of the community every day. They take away their impressions of things that need to happen, but they're not necessarily consistent with the general public's view, and that's what we're trying to accomplish through that strategic planning session. I think from a lessons learned perspective, we needed to have more public engagement, but as you mentioned, that's difficult to get. You can invite people, but a lot of the times they're working and other things, and they can't just take off their work and go sit for half a day, and participate. So we're doing the best we can there. There is an update that's going to be coming out probably within the next 30 days on the strategic plan. Don Ashton, our CAO, met with all of his department heads, and they really looked at what is it we need to do from here, and they've kind of focused on the specific things that they think are the high priorities. The board will be reviewing those, and it will determine if they've covered the right areas or not. But I know that the senior situation, the older adults, I didn't feel was properly represented at that strategic planning session, but a number of us who were aware of those introduced items, as you mentioned, on the white sheets and stuff, the voting stuff, that really emphasized the fact that we have to look at the needs of the seniors and make sure that we're addressing those properly as we are all the needs, because that's a growing population in our community. And so we have to recognize that and do everything we can to prepare for the increased median age in El Dorado Hills, at least, District 1, increasing over a period of time. So that's the trend. It's going to continue as I see it, particularly with the age-restricted housing we're putting in and not being able to get attainable housing. So there's a whole bunch of things that get tied to it. The only thing I'd like to also emphasize is what I'm trying to work with our CAO and our PIO, our Director of Communications on, is putting together very succinct fact sheets that try to summarize some of the stuff that's in the ordinances and other things to keep it very simple for people. What does this mean? It's kind of like the frequently asked questions list, similar to what we did with the Costco, because I thought that was helpful for people who had a lot of opinions to really get an understanding, if they read the fact sheet, as to what Costco was telling us, what the facts were, as opposed to a lot of the opinions or rumor mills or whatever. But there's 2 of them I'm really pushing to get some support on. 504 is one of those, because I think we need to break down what's in 504 so that the voters recognize what it is. It's approved by the voters, because we have charter reviews periodically and look at that. And the second one, I think, is vegetation management, because that is going to have a huge impact on a lot of the more rural areas of the county in particular. I think in El Dorado Hills and Cameron Park, we're pretty well prepared because of the years of accumulated ordinances at the local level, the local jurisdictions, in terms of requiring vacant lots to be cleaned up. In Cameron Park, they actually went to improve lot cleanup. So those kinds of things I think are going to improve, but I think we are going to end up with a ton of questions once this vegetation management thing really starts rolling out, and a fact sheet as opposed to giving somebody a 45-page ordinance you can address the frequently asked questions at least and try to let people know what's going on there. So we're going to continue to try to put some of those together. You can't do it for every subject, but where we can, we're going to try to get the Reader's Digest version of what it means to you as an individual as opposed to all of the legalese. So we'll work on that. But that's all I had to comment, but thank you for your comments. We'll move on. Question? Yeah, sorry.
Comment?
Yeah.
I've attended several of those meetings, and it does feel like a bunch of staff, county employees talking to the supervisors. And in one of the meetings, even though public comment was on the agenda, it wasn't taken. And John, thank you for being gracious enough to talk to me a break during that meeting. But if you're going to want the public engaged, accept public comment at the meeting.
Good point. And we do that by our agendas, but I won't say we always allow enough time for it because sometimes there's other issues that have to be addressed, and you've got to complete a meeting in a reasonable hour, or you lose your staff. So anyway, any other comments or questions on that subject? Okay, thank you. So let's move on then to the economic development report.
Okay, thank you, John. This is very interesting. The topic I have is to talk about sustainable housing. Previous speakers have mentioned it. John's mentioned it. It's a huge topic. At CDAC and being on that committee is a great opportunity because we can touch so many topics and areas and people throughout the county because so many of the things that go on are affected by community or economic development. In our last meeting, our committee decided to try to reach out to the public as best we can. This is an opportunity where you can be heard and your feedback can go back to CDAC about attainable housing, also known as workforce housing, also known as affordable housing, whatever you may call it, but it's housing for people from middle incomes to lower incomes. Middle income is, and this is a state number, I believe it's about $86,000, is that right, John? And then down is considered people who may need assistance with housing. A couple of facts. We're building as a state about 70% of the dwelling units that are needed year over year, and that's been going on for quite some time. So we're falling behind in dwelling units for all people, more impact to middle and lower income. Everybody has an opinion, and hopefully you'll share this, and I'll get to that in just a moment. Some of the concerns about a housing shortage, and this is something people don't always think about, is increased traffic. If people can't live near where they work, they're going to commute. And by spending more time on the road, they're going to increase pollution, you're going to have longer commutes. We have 2 commutes that go on daily from our county to Sacramento. You have the higher income earners who live in this part of the county going into Sacramento to work for the higher paying jobs, but you have the hourly workers coming from Sacramento into our county to provide the services that we need. Specifically, 3 worker segments have been identified that are short in our county and needed. Farm workers, rural workers in general, and caregivers for an aging population. And these are things that we've heard tonight and we continue to hear. So CDAC has decided to reach out to the community, and so I've got a couple of topics, and anybody who wants to respond can, but this is your opportunity. The first one is accessory dwelling units, ADUs, also known as granny flats. Everybody knows what that is, right? Building those, encouraging property owners to build small units on their existing property and make them available for rent. Any ideas, any thoughts?
I moved from San Jose. It didn't work well in San Jose. It creates traffic problems among a lot of others.
Well, we know we have traffic problems because people are coming here to work.
In the neighborhoods.
In the neighborhoods, okay. So, what about mini homes? Building a mini home community. People like these small little homes, whether they be portable or not. What would you think? I know there's an Dorado Hills family trying to build a community in Placerville based upon these mini homes. It's your opportunity.
What I'd say is if you have some good thoughts, submit them to my office. We'll make sure they get referred to Glenn. So yeah, it's a broad subject. And it's very difficult to suggest something that you know works somewhere else or won't work here. So but we've got to start talking about it.
On those mini homes. So in concept, since we have multi-family dwelling unit limit, 24 per acre, would there be some ordinance would have to be created to accommodate a mini home community? Because we do have a standard for single family homes.
More than likely, yes. You know, these things will require, you know, a fair amount of time. This is not something that we already have a solution for. So what we're looking for is feedback on what items may be of interest so that CDAC may pursue it. And it's really fact-finding at this point. What about recreational vehicles as permanent dwelling units?
No. It's called involuntary full-time.
I think we got a question in the back.
Raylan.
I have another question that's not about what you're proposing, but I was wondering, what is your effort you're talking about the working individuals and the younger people. What are we doing looking at attainable housing for our seniors? Those who are downsizing from where they live, but need to have affordable housing. All of the mobile home parks, rents are going sky high. These people are getting put out of their homes sooner. So are you addressing the needs of the seniors along with the workers?
We are looking to address people with incomes of $86,000 or less. Yes, it would include seniors, it would include working people, it includes professional people, it includes county supervisors.
I just don't want to lose the seniors in the working people.
Absolutely not.
Thank you.
Personally, I feel if you put a granite flat on your property, if you build a mini home community, you're barely addressing the tiniest impact to the property.
Absolutely.
Because South Lake Tahoe opened up, I think, an affordable housing development last year, 40 units?
Yeah, very small.
40 units. It's not going to solve the problem. It's the right thing to do, but it's tiny. On a bigger scale, what about apartment complexes of 400 to 500 units?
No pride in ownership. That's what apartments are. There's no pride in ownership. And talk to the sheriff who's right here. You know what Cameron Park has more officers there? Apartments more call for service. The public needs to be safe. We don't need more apartments.
Okay, so we don't need apartments. Do we not need any workers in the stores we go to, or to take care of the seniors with caregivers, or anybody who's making between minimum wage, which is $12 an hour, and $22 an hour? That's the challenge.
I don't think it's necessarily a lack of apartments. I think it's the concept of big block apartment complexes and the drains to public services on those type of, because I mean, the home ownership is not as much as the people who own homes, and they tend to be blights over time, because they're not kept up to a certain level of standard.
But we do have a significant, I'll get right to it, number of, a significant portion of our population that will never afford a home, whether it be in El Dorado Hills, in Placerville, and Camino. And so they're always going to live in a rented unit or a small unit. Not everybody's making $100,000, $200,000 a year. Most people are not. And the challenge is trying to find affordable housing where they can live and where they can work. And that's one of the concepts that John was talking about with the changes down in some of the property where the business park was. Because they also need to have access to transportation, which we don't have very much. And there's discussion about housing around transportation hubs so that people can use that transportation if they can't afford a car, or if not everybody in their household can afford a car.
And part of that discussion we had with that proposal that's out in the business park was the original, one of the original concepts we talked about was a small apartment complex, I think 40 to 60 apartments. And when we talked to the developer, they said, well, hey, we looked at it, we asked the owners of the business park, and then we looked at the services that are available in terms of public transportation, and it just doesn't fit. And their ability to recover their costs for building an apartment complex and then maybe selling it to someone to manage, to own, that it didn't pencil out. When we talked to the business park, the business owners, they said it's probably not the best fit. They were looking for primarily single-family homes. Consequently, they're not talking about any multifamily down there. And it gets the cost of building and the return on their investment.
Right. And just so you know, the Granny Flats, we had a rate given to us in our meeting. Average cost was about $280,000 to build. Is that affordable? Question about it.
Is Folsom addressing its affordable housing with all those huge apartment buildings they're putting in?
That's exactly what they're doing.
So,
and it's not necessarily by their choice.
So theoretically, people working here could live across the
They
line,
could.
and the taxes and the sales tax and all that sort of thing stays in Folsom even though their employment is here.
Right, which is a significant problem with your sales tax. It's just like you're hiring earners here, going to Sacramento, having lunch, doing their shopping on their lunch break before and after work, and spending their dollars in Sacramento, whereas they're only here at night and on the weekends. So that's a valid point as well. But Folsom is building quite a large number of apartment units right now, partially because they've fallen off the attainable housing and they have to keep on.
Isn't this addressed in the general plan, or is the general plan non-workable now?
We're updating the regional housing analysis to determine what needs to be there based upon the state's distribution of needed housing, which comes to us from SACOG. But they are basically defining more needs than what we did in the last 10-year cycle. So with that update we're going to come up with, we're going to have to identify where are locations that we can put in affordable housing consistent with what the state is trying to develop. But it always is going to come down probably to a subsidy. How do you do this without some form of federal subsidy, call it Section 8 vouchers or whatever it is, but how do you do it without federal or state subsidies? So the governor has done some things there that I want to talk about just briefly as a follow-on after we get past this, but there's no easy answers to this. But there is definitely a need. So how do you address that need? Because the crux of the situation is if we can't get more attainable housing in El Dorado County somewhere close to where our business operations are, our economic growth is not going to be there. We're just basically going to become a bedroom community with limited resources, and what happens is the services decline every year because there's no new revenues to pay for those services. So, that may be the eventuality of it. But we're trying very hard at the county level to look across the whole county, not just El Dorado Hills, and say, where do we have opportunities to bring in some attainable housing? And some of these are landowners who want to build these mini homes on already approved parcels and put them in place. So if we can work with them and come up with something that's consistent with the general plan and come up with something that makes sense from an economics perspective, with or without subsidies, then maybe we can move forward with some of that. But you have to get started somewhere, is the way I'm looking at it. So
Isn't it tied to a lot of the developments, or is it just the development of certain sites that have a certain percentage of affordable housing?
There's a provision called inclusionary housing where you can require each major subdivision to include some affordable housing element. We've not invoked that in El Dorado County. That's one of the options. I'm not sure that's a good solution either. So we're still looking for ideas is what it comes down to. Buzz.
What about Parker's plans for El Dorado Hills on both sides? Does anyone know how many apartments? I've heard that there are going to be apartments included in that. Does anyone know much about that, or how many there are, or how large they are?
The Central El Dorado Hills specific plan, which is the one in behind Rayleigh's, has changed dramatically from what they brought forward 3 or 4 years ago. And we were hoping to be able to bring that forward and discuss more of the specifics, but the latest impact that happened there was the TIM fees and what's going on in that whole arena, because we can no longer offer credits for that kind of a subdivision that were there in the past. And so Raphael's had that discussion with Parker Development Company, and it appears that all the efforts that have been put into trying to come up with this development agreement and get an understanding of how that's going to be developed and what kind of housing is on it has kind of gone on hold again. So I don't know where it's going to lead, but
keep it on hold.
Yeah, and then Marble Valley is the other part, which is more on the Cameron Park side, but that's still a project that's very amenable, I think, to a lot of different ideas. But it's all going to come down to cost and what can we do to to make sure that you use the most appropriate economics involved to try to attain some affordable housing. But it's going to be an ongoing struggle. So
let me wrap this up.
Yeah.
This is not just El Dorado Hills, even though this is the El Dorado Hills Community Council. CDAC is responsible for the entire county. The problems that the farmers have, the ranchers have, is they can't get enough workers because there's no place for them to live that they can afford. The challenges for us in our community is right now we're about 22% of the county's population. We'll be growing to about 25% of the county's population. So the county is growing. El Dorado Hills is. El Dorado Hills is not rural like much of the county. So a lot of the impact, a lot of need for services are here. I employ a lot of hourly workers. They can't afford to live here. We can't find enough employees to work for us because they can work closer to where they live in Sacramento. And so it's a challenge. It's going to continue to be a challenge. It's going to be an ever-increasing challenge. I don't have the answers. So the point of the exercise is to try to get some feedback so CDAC can then make some conclusions. Where might we spend some of our time and effort? So large apartment complexes, RVs, mini homes, ADUs built on existing property. Any of those sound reasonable to you? Or does everybody just want to close the door and not let anybody into the county? And as Supervisor Heidel said, you will see a significant reduction of available services because of that. Janelle?
What about condos and townhomes? Because those are owner occupied, they're less expensive, and it meets usually that price range. The only thing is that being in lending and having that background is that usually it's a low down payment. Programs are what they need, and a lot of times, what I would come to is that I can qualify them for the house portion, but then the HOA fees basically price them out. So if you have a place that has low HOA fees, but a price range that most people can afford, then you have the pride of ownership because they're going to want to make sure that they're making that monthly payment, they're building equity, they can basically their home until they decide if they want to sell it or even upgrade.
I completely agree with that. However, again, you're addressing middle to upper income people, even to afford a condo or a townhouse these days. There's a significant percent of the population who never own a property. I think we need the condos and townhomes in our county to keep our seniors. I think a lot of our seniors decide, they downsize to the single, level home. They've gone into maybe a $55 community and their lawns are taken care of. But maybe some want to be able to live in a nice condo or in a nice townhome and be able to lock the door and travel, be able to have an easier, lifestyle. We do not have that ability to offer well-to-do seniors to live in a really nice condo. It's not an option for them in El Dorado Hills. They have to move to Folsom. Then Folsom gets all their tax revenue as well, because Folsom has condos and townhomes. We don't. I think personally it would be a nice thing to have. I don't think it necessarily is a solution to the housing problem, but I completely agree with you. I think exactly. And part of the thing with Folsom is that they're focused on a very small area. Their city limits geographically is small. But it's talking about countywide because we have 2 incorporated cities and that's it. So those services are spread out over a huge area, supporting less than 190,000 people. That the dollars, they don't add up. Right. And that brings up another thing. South Lake Tahoe has a lot of very old hotels. There's some in Placerville as well. Those have been converted into apartments or living units. And you want to talk about an opportunity for crime, someone living in 400 square feet in what's basically, still a rundown hotel. I see that as not necessarily a great choice, but if that's what people can afford and it's maintained, and also remember, a very, very high percentage of low-income people are law-abiding citizens. By nature, just because you don't make a lot of money, just because you don't have a lot of education or a lot of brain power, and you may be making $12 to $18 to $20 an hour, does not necessarily qualify you to be, the scorn of society, let's say, in my opinion. There was a question over here. Helen?
I don't know if
And I wanted to say that we moved to El Dorado Hills in 1994. My husband and I were both state employees, and we are retired now. We live in Waterford in a very upscale neighborhood in an upscale house. And we bought a condo in Florida, which we just sold. And, you know, we're not using half of our house now. We have 4 bedrooms. There are just 2 of us living there. We have 3 bathrooms. We don't need all of that. We have a separate dining room and a living room. We don't need all of that. And if there was a condo in this area, I would consider moving there immediately. I mean, we went through a major storm in Florida, and the housing agents, the people that we pay HOA fees every month, and the people that ran the condominium area, and there were different sizes of homes there, and we're all on one floor, and we are here, and having spent some time in homes with more than 1 floor, it's very hard to get around when you have to have some assistance, and I'm supposed to be using a walker, but I don't because I can't get around in it very well. And I really think that if you're thinking about what this area needs, and I think that from everything I've read, the number of seniors is increasing, and we have a terrible time finding a blue parking space out there, and you need to take into consideration meeting the needs of these, I think they still are taxpayers, whether they have a job or not. If they have a pension, they're paying taxes on that, they're paying into Medicare. And I think you need to really think about that. And I know that having been a state employee for a lot of years, and I lived in Southern California before I moved up here, and I grew up in Illinois near Chicago, and I decided to only apply for internships in areas where I did not have to shovel snow. But there, you know, my husband and I have driven all over California. There are no resorts similar to what they have in Florida and resort life. Like where we lived and where our condo was, they had all the different sporting events. They had tennis courts, they had a bocce court, they had all kinds of things there for the people that live there. And I just would really like to see those kinds of communities growing up in California if that's possible.
Excellent idea.
It's an excellent idea. I completely agree with you. I would like to live in one. I started in a townhouse in Southern California, our first property, and then we were able to move up. All of those are great ideas, and all of those are also important. The focus, though, of this conversation is really the lower end, income earners who we need in our community. We need them here at the CST. We need them at all the shops and centers. We need them caring for our seniors. They are needed, and they need to be a part of this community. Hopefully, Folsom will build enough new apartment units to provide not only the people Folsom needs, but we need as well. And this is countywide, but it is something we need, and I appreciate the feedback. Any other comment before I pass it on and let people want to go home?
So you made a comment, and I don't know, it came out the wrong way, but it bothers me, so I need to address it. And I just want to make sure that we all agree that your wage earning has nothing at all to do with your brain power.
Exactly.
And so that might be somebody that's down in their luck, because that's something that's happened in their house, their family, or it could be our kids, and it's the first job they've ever had, and that's all that they make. So I just want to make sure
I appreciate that. That's another thing that CDAC is looking at, is keeping our young people in our county. They reach 18, where do they go? We don't have a 4-year college. We don't have vocational training for them. They leave our county, they may get a really good job somewhere, and we may not see them come back. And that's another strong issue that we have. But whatever people's circumstances are, and there are many that cause people to not have college degrees, to not have the ability to make a higher income, but they all deserve a
a safe place to live. They all deserve a job that's going to, provide them with an income that satisfies them from a personal standpoint, that they can contribute to our community. And you don't have to be, in my opinion, only a wealthy person to contribute. There's opportunities for everybody to contribute, but they need a place to sleep at night.
Thank you, Glenn. So I want to move on because we're getting a little late in the hour, but I want to make 3 basic comments on, additional comments on economic development. It's been reported to me that the permits are being pulled for the town center apartments. So there will be some apartments available in town center probably within about a year and a half. That's going to go into construction. They're luxury apartments, so they serve a certain clientele, but not the one we talked about, but that is economic development. The other one, I think APAC has talked about this, the Aloft Hotel has pulled permits. So they're now building the second hotel in town center. It's a Marriott branch. If you're not affiliated with or associated with the Aloft, A-L-O-F-T, but that'll be starting construction soon, and so you'll see that rise up in the town center area. And then the last thing is we have talked in the past about the housing bill, Senate Bill 50. It was proposed by Senator Wiener, and that has been removed from further consideration this year. It says it was a bill that would encourage building housing around transit for the state where the local control would be taken away and usurped by the state's authority. That did not pass the last council, and so we won't see it come back until probably the earliest January 2020. So I know we had discussions on that, but that's off the table here. So I think that's another thing that's breaking in economic development that's important to understand. So with that, why don't we pass the microphone over to infrastructure?
Has anyone noticed on Solo Valley during school hours it's a little busy with traffic? Anyone noticed that? Okay. I'm stating the obvious, but now the wisdom of putting 3 schools within stone's throw, you got Oak Ridge, Rolling Hills, and Solo Valley, that's another discussion. I won't bore you with that. But Supervisor Heidel asked me to review some plans that the Department of Transportation put together, and they're coordinating with specifically the Silver Valley Elementary School in the middle, or excuse me, on the far end, and then you got Oak Meadow further on down. But they're looking to, in the along the frontage on Silver Valley, the Silver Valley Elementary, they're looking to do an additional turn-in, drop-off, and pick-up area along pretty much the entire frontage of Silver Valley Elementary School there. And so I think that'll be a major step in the right direction to help clear up a lot of the traffic issues. So that's something that just started. They just have some preliminary draft alternatives. They'll sit down with the school and have out some options of what would be the best scenario in which to help alleviate at least that portion of the traffic that's occurring there. So, any questions on anything else? Thank you. That was short and sweet.
All right, I'll keep it short and sweet as well. So a few updates, just considerations for the health of our community. I was one of the main docs on the Paradise fires occurred, and pretty terrifying to see the cases, the disease, the devastation. But the stories were very similar along the lines of not getting fair warning. It was a fast-moving fire for sure. But even those that might have had some time did not, because of not having a great, essentially, cell phone connection, internet access, etc. So broadband's a real deal issue around health in our community. And I would encourage many people in this audience to talk and start thinking about what we can do as a county to have better broadband. I know there's some discussion, early conversations around potential proposals around looking at this as a county. So look for that, advocate for that. It's important for our health. The other thing I wanted to mention was around veterans. There was just a stand down. A stand down event is an event where veterans can come and get options for housing, mental health, dental care, etc. There was just one in Placer County this week, and then Elrod County is going to have one September 29th. So for those veterans who are in the community, 10%, we have the highest per capita rate of veterans in California. 10% of us are veterans. Both my parents are, grandparents that have passed on, but I'm an Army Reserve. So these are a community that we should be reaching out to support. And we have one here September 29th to connect people to services they need. And then 211, look online. I was just looking online a little bit more about it. We as a community need to give feedback to 211 to better build this tool for our community. This is not something that will become better until we kind of get feedback along the way. So I want to thank John for all his leadership on so many of these important issues, including housing. And I was hoping that maybe you could talk a little bit about the governor's update.
And that's a perfect segue, because one of the things we talked about at CDAC were the 3 enabling things to bring economic development to the county. In particular, was attainable housing, broadband, because the services, high data speed services and stuff are needed by the businesses that are interested in moving here, including those that want to relocate from the Bay Area to live in a rural environment that do telecommuting. They need to have high-speed data, so it's not only the education, the health aspect of it, it's a business proposition as well. And then the third one is electrical power rates, which again, CDAC has looked at. What are the opportunities to try to get more affordable electric power distributed within El Dorado County? There's some discussions going on right there that are premature to talk about, but we're continuing to explore that. So that's a perfect segue. The other thing I did want to mention relative to the governor's revised budget is this was the May update, May revision, where the governor has increased the funding for homeless housing in particular from $500 million to $650 million. But the more important part to me is he's recognized that a lot of that money needs to go directly to counties and not be administered through state grants. So he's authorized $275 million to set aside to be allocated directly to counties. To me, that's a huge enabler, because the counties are much more effective at delivering these services, and if we don't have to go through all the hoops and bells and whistles and everything else with the state to make this stuff happen, we'll be able to accomplish some affordable housing, which is in the, some homeless housing, which is in the affordable housing category. So I'm hoping that the promises made here are kept, and we're able to enable programs that start making those things happen. So again, I think that's a step in the right direction. With that, I just wanted to cover Cindy's item on the happenings in El Dorado Hills, because there are some, I think, of importance. And there, again, there's a copy in the back of the room there, if you'd like to get it, but I'd just like to highlight 4 specific things that are going on. Farmers markets, which I know is very popular in El Dorado Hills, they're starting up on the 26th. May 26th to October 17th. They're held every Sunday from 8 a.m. to 1 p.m. in El Dorado Hills Town Center. So if you're a shopper and a user of the farmers markets, that's going to start up again for this harvest season. The second one is the June 1st inaugural Youth Fishing Derby, which is sponsored by El Dorado Hills Community Services District. That'll be held in the town center, I should say town center, the Serrano Lake area, which is right off the Silver Valley Parkway. The CSD is sponsored with fish planting and stuff. It's a youth fishing derby, but it's the first time it's been brought to El Dorado Hills, and so I think that's a great opportunity. It's for locally for kids to learn how to fish and have a good time. So the next one is the Live on the Boulevard Thursday night series in the town center, where they actually offer a series of bands, concerts, etc. It's in the Stephen Young Amphitheater. That starts on June 13th, so about 2.5 weeks away, and it runs through September 19th. So if you're a fan of open air music and just strolling the boulevard there around the lake and enjoying the evening hours and stuff, that series is starting up. Likewise, the El Dorado Hills Community Services District Summer Concert Series is starting June 14th. So the middle of June is the target for those two. It runs from 7 to 10 p.m. and it's held right out here in our facility that's part of this particular park development. So those are the 4 I wanted to highlight. I know I've enjoyed a lot of the outdoor concert series. It's just a relaxing way when it's not 105 degrees, maybe only 95 degrees, to go out and enjoy the shade with some music and some libation, and it's a good time. So I encourage everybody to do that. So with that, are there any go-backs or other comments? Yeah, Joel.
El Dorado County Fair?
The El Dorado County Fair, I thought our fair representative was going to be here tonight. I know Cindy was encouraging him to show up, but I have not. I never got anything back on it. So, but the El Dorado County Fair is about to start. I don't remember the specific dates, but I do know that the I shouldn't guess at this without looking at my calendar. Does anybody know the specific dates for the fair?
Usually it's on Father's Day. So it starts. Yeah, so it starts on Thursday and goes through Father's Day.
Okay.
It's not on the list.
You're right. I'll have to ask Cindy how that got overlooked, because it should be on the list. So we're trying to send me some information. Maybe what I'll do is I'll use the Nextdoor account just to put out a notice on the fair, since we didn't get it in here, because I know there's some free tickets that they wanted to hand out and distribute like they did last year. But for whatever reason, it just didn't come together on it. So we'll see if that's still an opportunity. But thank you, Joel for bringing that up. So council member items, our next meeting, as you mentioned, is Monday, June 3rd, back here, same place, same time. Next month's guest speaker is going to be Shelley Blair from our State Fish and Wildlife Biologist area. She's going to actually talk about two subjects. One is the county level deer fatalities along Highway 50, which those seem to be increasing as the herd increases and as more traffic increases, particularly in the evening hours and nighttime hours. So she's going to talk about that, but more so she's also going to talk about why you shouldn't be feeding the deer locally, because it creates a lot of problems. And there's an awful lot of people in my neighborhood, and I'm sure most of the other residential neighborhoods that have a lot of deer population that feel it's necessary to feed the deer, and her message is it's the worst thing you can do not feed the deer. So she's going to be able to deliver that message and answer questions at next month's meeting. So if you have any particular interest in the wildlife aspect of things, then Shelley will be here to answer your questions. And with that, I'm going to say we're adjourned before 9 o'clock. So we made it. Thank you for your attendance. I hope to see you back next month.